A car is a more complicated thing than you think.
Sorry. Okay, you're okay? You're okay.
This past weekend, Brandon just had a big off, so the guys back there are working on that.
Unfortunately, then it kind of puts certain projects behind and you can't anticipate everything, so.
As you can imagine, every modification delay the validation of the aero package.
This is where you have the most rule change.
Yeah, ideally we won't spend any money going down the wrong road.
Designing a full car from scratch, it's a massive work. We have some limitation about resources, right? Plus the fact that the regs are not completely defined and not released yet. It's always, we need to work, otherwise we'll be late, but not too deep because we are waiting for some answer from the series. We've started contacting different suppliers in different areas about electronics, but our decision will have to happen very quickly. The lead time are completely insane right now.
The knock-on effect from COVID is still happening.
Oh, it's still there, and they don't expect that to clear up soon.
Supply chain's constantly a consideration for us. You know, things get held up in customs or
Struggling with getting some raw material.
stuff being on, boats for twice as long as they would be normally.
Not enough people to machine them.
It's all kind of a domino effect.
And there is nothing that can change. Like right now, the supplier are saying, well, you can go and use someone else if you want. But there is no someone else that will do better. Some sensors, nothing very complicated, 32 weeks lead time.
Wow.
Normally you have quotation of a fully machined part. This quotation is valid for 30 days. That's what everybody is doing. Right now, I receive some quotation valid for 2 days.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And there is no money that can change anything. It's just like you take it, you don't take it. All that will add on the project, and then on our side, we need to be efficient and ready as early as possible to order, otherwise we'll be late.
Maybe we have to select the material spec according what is available and not, the opposite. I mean, we have to change a bit our way of working.
Sno Drift Rally 2023 to start off the ARI Championship.
Definitely nice to be back, new season.
Coming back as reigning champions, it's given us another kind of area we need to focus on in order to defend our crown.
So coming from last year, we had a 2-car race program. Going into the 2023 season, we have our 1 race car outfitted with the new bodywork and some changes to the engine, such as a restrictor change and a maximum boost pressure change. Per regulations from ARA, and we've turned one of our cars into our test comparison car with our new generation vehicle.
So working on the new car, it was important for us to continue competing with the previous generation of car. We would love to have competed the full year with the new car, but with us only being able to get it done by midway in the year, we had to continue to develop our old generation of car and compete with that for the first part of the year.
So basically, very early on, we had to define 2 different teams. I needed to identify a team that will just be in charge of get the race car for ready for Sno Drift. And in the same time, we have been re-prepping the second 2022 race car to keep it as a test mule to be able to compare against 23R from on different aspects. After identifying those teams, then they really right now works really separately. So we have the new rally car team, and we have the old rally car team. And at some point it will merge when we will introduce the new rally car.
Amazing way to start off the year. Literally starting off this year how we ended the last year, so really stoked on that. Yeah, it'll be cool to put this car on gravel and get a setup for the new changes, and it's just full send.
We've started identifying different area that would make sense to put our focus on. As we did say, the overall weight of the car is not really a concern, but where the weight is definitely is. So for example, on the turbo position right now it's very high. It's not really well located. It's difficult to work on. If we have to change the turbo to service all of that, it's difficult. Then we would need to try to move the engine towards the center of the car. That will help to locate the turbo, but that will also massively help overall COG and weight distribution.
The current rally cars have the turbo behind the right head, similar to the OEM layout. Because we're trying to move the engine back as far as we can for handling purposes, we don't have space to package that anymore. So the turbo will be down in front of the engine.
I mean, the existing cars use a normal Subaru style transaxle layout, so the engine's hanging over the front wheels.
If we can move this engine, this huge mass, back 5-10 millimeters, it makes a big effect on the handling. So we don't stress the drive shaft angles too extreme, but we're able to bring the engine back as far as we can.
We've divided things in different steps. So we've done a dry build.
Dry build, we get all these assembly drawings. We assemble all the sub-assemblies we can, get all that in the chassis, make sure it all fits before we paint it. That way we're not drilling any holes, we're not welding, none of that stuff.
Basically the dry build happened before the chassis go to paint. So it's to double check that things will fit, that another small bracket or something welded is not needed. There is always a challenge between delivery, availability, and when we have a window to do a dry build. The thing, if we are getting late on the design or parts delivery and all that, it will be more pressure on the technician. So we are trying to avoid that, but still I think it will happen that they will have a lot of pressure to build those cars on time.
But also having the full vehicle in CAD, we've been able to bring them in and say, hey, here's where we're going to locate this, or here's how this goes together, and get their feedback ahead of time, rather than after all the parts are ordered and they get it and they're can't get their impact wrench in somewhere or something like that. So
hopefully we'll receive parts, we'll bolt on parts, and we'll not have to come up on a lot of custom-made last-minute parts. It will happen, it always happens, but we really try to work hard on reducing as much as possible this painful phase.
We're in the special projects room now at Vermont SportsCar, building the new 23R rally car.
We are in the final assembly process.
So generally, like when we build a fresh car, it comes into us from the paint shop. We'll start out by putting in the brake lines and the wiring loom, all the fire extinguisher lines, and all the components that stay put generally for the life of a car, and then we start to put on the bigger sub-assemblies.
All the saddles at this point would be bonded in for all that stuff to attach to. We would do all that. Then from there, we would move on to installing the fuel cell, installing all the suspension components, which would all be built into sub-assemblies.
You go layers and layers and layers deeper, and again, it's something like an airbox. You think you could just do that after the fact, but When you're packaging so much into a car, it becomes a game of millimeters.
A race car is quite simple because we have 1 or 2 customers and only one target is to be very fast.
In a perfect world, everything would be designed before we ordered anything. But you can't do it that way. We kind of have to design it far enough to feel confident in its placement and that it won't interfere with the components around it, and then just keep moving.
A lot of the sub-assemblies we'll take all the components and put them together in their final specifications off the car so we can put on full suspension assemblies like all the control arms, the uprights, the brakes, dampers. It makes putting the car together quite a bit quicker because you can put on big groups of components rather than every little piece at a time.
We are really happy of the quality of the product. Like what we've designed on the paper, on the computer, let's say, to see that apply on the car now, we can see like, okay, I feel pretty good about it. One complete unknown is the pace and reliability. Those two things, it's even if we tried hard, without testing on real roads, we don't know.
There's always something with a new car build that will hold you up, whether it's part supply or an outside vendor made something and it's not quite right, issues with electronics, so on and so forth. But overall, it's going really well.
We're getting pretty close now to being able to put fuel in the car and drop it on the ground and fire it up for the first time. We'll start it up and do a full systems check and run it on the chassis dyno for a bit to make sure that everything's in good working order before we take it to a track to do a shakedown before the test.
We have planned an extensive test program, but a race environment is different from the test.
In total, we'll have between 15 and 20 actual test days before it ever sees competition.
We're still designing and building parts for this car.
This car is not proven at all.
Finally had our first real kind of failure on the car.
The challenge was then we were in rural Ohio.
You know, if nothing breaks, then people assume you didn't push the envelope hard enough.